This is a story of world first antibiotic penicillin, which is declared as single greatest victory of humans over diseases. And the hero of this story is Mr. Alexander Fleming, who is a Scottish bacteriologist and who saved millions of lives from these deadly bacteria. Penicillin are a group of beta-lactam antibiotic obtained from Penicillium molds. So let the story begin. So this story began in 1928 in London in the laboratory of Mr. Alexander Fleming. So he was trying to discover a medicine which can destroy the bacteria.
Until a few years ago, penicillin was unknown. The discovery was a remarkable achievement of the scientific method. It began in the year 1928 in London in the laboratory of Dr. Alexander Fleming, a British bacteriologist. For a number of years, Fleming had been seeking a drug that would destroy types of bacteria that cause infection. Just now, he was growing a number of colonies of these infectious bacteria for his experiments. Scientists call these growths bacterial cultures. This day, he found that one of his bacterial cultures had become polluted. A spot of mold had developed in the dish, spoiling the culture. Dr. Fleming was about to throw the polluted dish away when something stopped him. He noticed that around the mold there was a ring of clear jelly, free of bacteria. Examining the jelly more closely, he began to wonder if something in the mold was killing the bacteria. Was it possible that here was a substance that could be used to prevent infection? This was a question worth investigating.
I say, gentlemen, here's something interesting. Take a look at this dish.
Of this? Oh, yes. It's got a bit moldy, hasn't it? That's too bad. But after all, it happens all the time.
No, take a closer look. You
What?
notice anything odd?
Why? Why?
See that ring?
Why, yes. It's clear, isn't it?
Right. I'd say something in that mold is destroying the starch in that dish.
That is interesting. What do you make of it?
I don't know. I think it's worth looking into. It looks good. Very good.
Well, I say, do you think perhaps there's something there we ought to follow up?
And perhaps, gentlemen, we've got a drug that will destroy infectious bacteria. But before we know, we've got work to do. Come here.
Dr. Fleming and his assistants undertook a number of experiments to test his idea that the mold might be a weapon against disease. First, they introduced the mold-infested broth into other cultures of bacteria. Later, they found that in many of these cultures, too, the bacteria were destroyed. But Dr. Fleming wondered if it killed bacteria, might it not also be harmful to living tissues? To determine this, they injected the drug into animals. They found that the animals were not harmed by the drug. Then, mixing it with human blood, Dr. Fleming determined that it did not harm the germ-killing cells in the bloodstream. Dr. Fleming reached the conclusion that he had found a drug that would destroy bacteria and that, some evidence indicated, would not harm human tissues. He published a paper describing his experiments. But this was only the beginning. 10 years later, another British scientist, Dr. Howard Florey, conducted a number of experiments to verify Fleming's findings, and then, along with other scientists, developed penicillin as a drug of amazing power against disease. This led to the final stage, the solution of the problem. Penicillin was established as a drug of amazing effectiveness against infection. These, then, are the elements of the scientific method. First, perception of the problem. Second, preliminary observations to suggest solutions. Third, the development of one or more hypotheses. Fourth, the testing of these hypotheses through extended observation or experimentation. Fifth, the choice of a workable solution to the problem.
A fast, safe cure for syphilis. This is what man had been searching for hundreds of years. In the rapid treatment centers and hospitals, teams of health workers, veterans of the Salvasan clinics, were trained in the new techniques. The education campaign, so successfully launched in 1936, had not been allowed to die, for there was a new generation coming along, and uninformed people who should be informed. The public now accepted frank publicity on syphilis without embarrassment. Theaters showed films on syphilis as part of their regular programs. Jukeboxes and disc jockeys were enlisted in the campaign. Patients turned up for treatment, either in response to the education campaign or as a result of routine blood tests still required by state laws.